Hi, Dawn Summers here with Dawn Summers Fashion Studio, and today we're going to go over the tutorial for making this cute little handbag. So what we're learning today is a lot of sewing skills. This is about a level 2 for construction. So if you've got some sewing skills already, this is a great bag to hone in on your skills. I designed this bag because I wanted something that I could make the inside look as clean as the outside, but yet something fun and interesting. So I designed this bag for the strap to go all the way around. So it looks really neat and clean inside and out. You guys, if you follow my steps from my pattern and from the tutorial today, it's gonna look professional, it's not gonna look homemade at all, and it's a super cute bag to carry around with you. I encourage you to purchase the pattern, which is many pages of detailed instructions and photos to help you build this bag that you can follow along, as well as this video tutorial. So the way we're gonna get started is I'm gonna show you what you need for this pattern. So first we're going to purchase some 10-inch cutouts. We're going to purchase a package or some packages, if you have multiple people making this bag, of 5-inch square cutouts, all pre-cut. That's the key, is to have them pre-cut so you have straight edges and you can sew and not get out of balance, because that's when everything will go astray. Then you also need some fabric, and we're going to cut a strip of fabric to make our strap. So you want a corresponding fabric that looks well with the blend of the fabrics. So the first part of this bag is the most fun. So designing is the creativity part, the fun part. So we're going to design this bag. So what I have my students do is to come up and select 4 squares that will be their bag. So you're gonna put together, you can mix and choose, and I have more here, so I can like go through and get what balance looks right to me. Do I want some yellow in there? Maybe not quite so much bright yellow, and we'll get like a little softer one. So the first step is designing. These two are too close, so I might get a darker one in there. Ooh, nope, that's the same one. Let's do something a little different. So the idea is to design the way you want to design it. That looks like a nice balance. So you're gonna design your 4 squares together, and then you're gonna choose a lining for that. So you might wanna choose a lining that is a contrast. You might wanna choose one that's the same material, because in the end, all you're gonna see of the lining is the little strip at the top. You're gonna see it full inside, the little strip at the top. So what do you want to be your little contrast edge? Anything that you want. So you're gonna select your 4 squares and a piece of lining, and you're gonna put it to the side. Then you're gonna do the same thing to create your back. So you want 2 sections of this. So the students will come up, they'll create their bag, how they want it to look, and we're gonna lay it out. So once they take it back to their spot, you're gonna lay it out the way you want it to look. And what I recommend at this stage, when you have the squares laying out the way you want them, some fabrics might be directional, which is a whole nother tutorial on directional fabrics. So make sure you're looking at that. And lay it out the way you want it. And I suggest taking a picture, because once you sew it, your 4 squares are gonna be all sitting there, and you can turn them in different ways, and you might not remember exactly how you had them. So you're gonna wanna take a picture. So this is how I wanna set up one of my bags. Now, I'm gonna play around and play with some fabrics to get my back. And everything does kind of blend here. It's really pretty. These are batik fabrics, which is a technique for the printing process. I think I'll have a little more blues on the back. Let's do a little shifting. And then I think I want a little peak of yellow to come over the top. So designing is always the fun part. No, I don't want those together that are both so florally. Let's choose, ooh, that looks good. So this is what I'm choosing for a front and a back, and I want my squares to lay just like that. So I'm going to take a picture of how they look so I'll remember as I go forward. Now what we're getting ready to do is sew. So I'm going to shift over here to my sewing machine, and we are going to sew the first pieces together. If you are not a pin user, I suggest you use pins to keep everything lined up, because the idea for this whole project is to be concise and precise, and we're learning quality. So we're going to sew the right sides together, just on the one side. I'm going to put a little pin just to hold them together. And we're going to sew, everything is sewn at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we learned that in our tutorial for in our stitching. On this machine, it's right at the edge. So we are going to just stitch this side. And I'm going to back stitch to lock it. Make sure my edges are even. Once again, we are learning to be in control and to make a really good seam. So there's our first seam, 1/4 inch, straight. I'm gonna take our pin out. There's my cute little pin cushion. And I have my small little ironing board set up over here. I'm gonna set my stitches real quick and then press it open. Everything needs to be pressed open. So just a little history here with my machine, or my ironing board and my little iron. Isn't this cute? This iron I got from Missouri Star, and it's just small and it works great with these projects. It works great to travel. It's a perfect little ironing board. And my fun ironing board, this is my iron, my fun ironing board was actually made by my grandpa. He made this for me and gave it to me way back when I was in high school or middle school, because he thought it would be helpful. And it has withstood the years. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it has withstood a lot of years. So here's our first piece. And then what we're going to do is going to take our next part, and I'm just going to kind of show you, because I already have one made here, that here is, if I sewed that together, there's the front, both sides. So if I was to keep sewing, you're going to put your next pieces together and sew them, and they would come out just like this. But for speed, I'm going to go ahead and that's what they would look like. Now we're going to get ready to sew the next two pieces together. And when you're sewing, the idea is to make sure that your lines match up. So we're going to put our right sides together. And the first thing we check is our seam. And we're going to adjust it until it's completely matched up. And it needs to match up at that 1/4 inch spot. So I'm going to put a pin right there to lock it in. If I'm a little off on the upper edge or the lower edge, that's all right, because we want it to match right there. There we go. And those pins will hold it. Once again, we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Do a back stitch here to lock it in. And it's not going anywhere because we've got that pin. Go slow over my pin. Make sure everything's lined up, double check it. Back stitch and lock it. Take our pins out, and fingers crossed that it didn't slip and our seam is matched up. Yay! So then we're going to bring it over to the iron and ironing board, and we're going to press it open. So if I was to go ahead and complete that step, but instead I do have one that is already sewn together. So we're going to move on to this one. And as you can see, I have put a pin in the top so that I would remember which is the top. So this combination of fabric is a little different, but this is what it looks like once you press it. and the back is all pressed nice. Making sure everything lines up perfectly. So you're gonna do the front and the back, get both pieces sewn together just like that. Now the next step is we're going to be putting our lining on the bag. So let's just grab our lining, and what we're gonna do is we're going to sew the right sides together. Just so we can see this a little better, I'm gonna press this little line out. Okay, so we're gonna put right sides together, and remember this is the top. So this, that started out as a 5-inch, 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 5-inch. We took a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a 1/4 inch here. So that means that your piece is gonna be a 1/4 inch smaller and a 1/4 inch smaller. So a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. So in other words, this is a 9.5 by 9.5 instead of 10 by 10. This is 10 by 10. So when we put this square on there, we are going to pin, make sure the bottom edge is even and the side is even. And then we're gonna turn it over, and you can see that we are overlapped a little bit on one side and the top. And I know this is the top because there's my pin. The top is what you want it to overlap and not on the side. So this is the only place that we're going to cut. I've got my little scissors here, which is not ideal, but we're just gonna cut this down to size. Shaking up a little bit of material. There. So now we're gonna stitch that as well. So I'm going to mark to put a pin to hold it in place. And now we've got our top that we're gonna leave open, and we're gonna stitch all the way around this this bag and leaving the top open. So you're gonna do that on your machine, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now instead of stitching, I'm gonna show you one that I have stitched. So once you stitch it down, you're gonna start where the fabric starts of the bag and not up on the lining. You're gonna stitch down to the corner, you're gonna pivot and turn, stitch to the other corner, pivot and turn, and come up, and you're gonna back stitch. That's what it looks like on the front, and then your lining piece on the back. Once you've stitched that, I always press it down to embed the stitches in the fabric, and if there's any like little turn up places, that you can get those pressed down. Then we're going to clip our corners. So you can see I've already clipped the corner. Always make sure when you're clipping that you don't catch the stitch, because if you do, it's gonna create a hole. You're gonna get as close as you can without cutting it. So that is ideal because you want a really sharp, crisp corner when you turn it. So at this stage, we are ready to flip it. And I have a little tool here that will help us. So basically, you're just gonna reach in here and you're gonna turn it. You want it right side out at this point. And if you're having trouble getting a good point down there, I have this little tool that honestly, I don't remember where I bought. I've had it for years. It's a point turner, so you can get down in the corner and you can make it nice and crisp. Then it's kind of hard to get these pressed flat, so what I always do is I just run up along that seam as well, just to get it right up there. If you don't have a turner tool, you can use your scissors and kind of push, just make sure you don't poke through, just be careful. You can get your scissors up in there to get a nice crisp corner as well. And then sometimes I'll just take the round part and run it along the seam to kind of get it flattened out there. There it is. And that'll help you when you press it. Run it along the side. Now we're going to go ahead and give it a good press. My corners, and just, it's got to lay flat. Make sure you're getting all of the fabric out and nothing is tucked under, or it will cause a curve. Press that good and flat. Okay, and the next step is we're going to work on this top edge, getting it cleaned up. And what I like to do is just kind of bring this corner in just a little bit, because that's going to turn under, and that'll help make it just a little more of a crisp edge. Slightly in. And if you can't get it slightly in, that's fine as well, because it's going to be in the seam allowance anyway. All right, so put this down flat. So this is what our bag looks like once we get it turned. And there's the reverse. So everything is all clean. Nice clean finishes. So the next step is we're going to clean up and stitch the top down. So this is where it gets a little bit tedious, because we're going to do a clean finish, which means the edge is going to be turned under and it's going to look all clean and finished once it's done. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn under like a tiny little 1/8 of an inch, and we're going to press that down, and then in this next step we're going to turn it again and bring it up and over the material. So I'm going to move to the ironing board, and it's kind of tricky. That's where this little tiny guy helps out. So we're just pressing under a tiny little edge. Get that good and flat. And now we're going to turn him back over and create about 1/4 of an inch turn, and we're going to press that down. See how clean that is? Now to hold it down before we stitch, just put a couple pins in it. You see that good? There we go. And I'm going to bring it over here to my machine. Now we're going to sew an edge stitch, and an edge stitch literally is what it says. It's right on the edge of your material. You don't want to drop off. If you drop off and sew right in against the side of the material, that's called stitching in the ditch, and we are not doing that. We're doing an edge stitch. So you can see where my pin comes in and out. That's how close we're going to be to the edge. So now we're going to stitch it, and I'm going to put the needle close to the edge on this panel, but we want to stay a little ways away from the side edge. We are going to back it up and lock the stitch, but we don't want to get too close or it'll buckle up on us. We'll just do a couple and then keep going forward. There we go. Now I'm watching my center groove. That is the line that I want to follow. So I'm not really looking at anything else except keeping that line in the same spot. And I'm going to take my pin out. You guys can see the other side. I hope it looks all right. And when you get to the end, you're going to do a little back stitch, but once again, don't get too close to the end or it'll buckle on you. So. All right, let's see how we did. All right. I think I could work on it and get a little closer to the edge, but we're good. It's good. That's what the back looks like. Okay, it's all about practice. So now we have one complete panel, and you would want to do the whole same step on the second panel that you designed, but for time reasons, I already have one that is finished. It is close to the look of the one that we created over there. I do have to finish stitching down my side, but we're going to use this as our second panel. our two pockets, front and back. I guess they're not a pocket, they're a bag. There's the front and back. So we're getting ready to stitch the strap so that we can sew the two pieces together. Okay, now we're going to work on the strap. So what you need is some fabric that is about 45 inch width. And this is my contrasting fabric that I'm going to use, same as on this sample bag. And we're going to cut it at 3 3/4 inch width. So I use my cutting mat and my rotary cutter. And so I'm just going to measure up here to 1, 2, 3 3/4 using my handy dandy ruler. And I am going to use my rotary cutter. Let's see, kind of on a weird side. I'm gonna have to do it this way. 1 3/4. And we are just going to cut it. So we have one strip. Sometimes my cutter doesn't go clear through. I keep changing the blades. There we go. And so there is one at 44 inch width. So we need 2 of those. So I'm just gonna come up and cut, put him back on his line. And we're gonna cut 3 3/4. Always double check. What is it, measure twice, cut once? Or is that a carpentry term? Just a little teeny piece there. So there's 2 strips that are both 44 inches in length. We'll move our yardage out of the way. And our cutter. Always make sure you close your cutters back up so that nobody picks them up and gets cut. And I'm going to do a quick press job to get some of the wrinkles out of here. I'm just going to go ahead and put it all on there at the same time just to get it pressed a little down for me. I'm not going to press the end, so I want that flat. I'm just going to open and press those center pieces. Okay, now the next step is we're going to sew the ends together. We're going to sew the ends together at 1/4 inch. I'm going to put a pin in just so we can get started. Once again, 1/4 inch. And you'll want to do a back stitch lock, but once again, don't make it clear quite to the side or it'll buckle up on you. There we go. Shore them together. So there's your 1/4 inch seam, and just to keep it all clean, we'll just clip a few little threads here. And we are going to press this open. I'm going to embed the stitches, lock them in, and press it open. Always get it as flat as you can. All right, next step is the long step. We are going to take our piece with right sides together. So we're going to put the right side up and we are going to fold it over and we are going to stitch this long edge, 1/4 inch all the way down. Make sure that you do not stitch the end close. We're just going to start right here and go down 1/4 inch all the way. Started Up in there. Once again, we're going to back stitch, lock it in. That's my pin. And just hold it and keep an eye, 1/4 of an inch. If you're not used to holding them together, you would want to pin them. Okay, now that we have our strap sewn with our 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way down, we have to turn it. So make sure that your ends are open. And we are going to use this little tool. It's called a loop turner, and you can find them on the website at Joann Fabric. They're like less than, I think, $4, but it's a great tool. So what I'm gonna do, I've used safety pins, I've used all kinds of things, but when you're trying to turn a really long piece, it's helpful to have this long extension. So what I'm gonna do is I get down to this end, and I don't know what's easiest to see, but there's a little hook on the end. And we're not gonna just hook it because it's such a big piece. I'm gonna actually, oh, I slipped off of it there. I'm actually going to push the hook through the material so it'll grab onto it. So I wanna push it through to poke it. There it goes. And you have to carefully get it started turning first. And then once it starts going, you can see how easy it just turns. So kind of keep working it. There we go. Then we'll just unhook it and we will get the rest of it turned. I've seen people fight 10-15 minutes on turning these pieces. And this little tool is just amazing to get, especially a long piece like this turned. Grab in there. All right, there we go. There's our turned piece, all wrinkled and crumpled, and you can see nothing is flat. Now we're gonna take it over to the iron, and this is where your piece is gonna look professional or like it's homemade. The time that you take in this next step. So what we're gonna do is we're going to put it so the seam side is up, and we are just gonna kind of work it to get it flat. If the top edge is a little off, that's fine. And what I like to do is take my hem gauge, my seam gauge, and see how thick I am. I'm right at 1.5, which means my seam should be on the 3/4 mark, because that's where I want it to be in the center. So once you kind of eyeball it, you want it right in the center. I've seen a lot that don't care, and the seam will end up over on this side or on that side, but you want it right down the middle. So the other thing you need to be mindful of is that seam allowance on the inside needs to all be to one direction. So I can feel it that I have it pressed this way. So as I go down, I can feel that it's turning right here. It just turned right there to go to this side. So what I'm gonna do is make sure it's all on that side. Do a quick check. Got a little wide on that side because we want that seam in the middle for the next step. And you're going to press it flat. Now I'm going to show you when it's flipped to the other side, like it's flipped over to this side, you're just gonna work it to get it back over to the other side. So it takes a little time on this step, but it's very worthwhile to take that time. Don't get in a hurry and don't get frustrated. Just keep trucking down your sash, your strap. Then on the other side, see how nice and straight that is. So you're going to press all the way down, working it carefully to make sure the seam allowance is all on the same side and making sure this seam is in the middle. So I'm going to push this to the side because I already have one that's finished, and we're going to move on to the next step. So the next step is your ends. So now your seam is pressed to the center, and the seam allowance is all on one side. And you're going to take your ends that's still open and you're just going to tuck them under. And you're going to make them so that they're flat. And we're just going to give it a press. So your ends are flat. And I've already tucked this one under, but I'll give it another press. So that's what your ends look like, and the back side. Now we're going to do an edge stitch just to close that. So we'll bring it over here to the machine, and we are going to just do a tiny little edge stitch. And once again, you're going to do a little back stitch to lock it. There, he went off, but I think we got him back on there. All right. And we'll get down to this end and do a little back stitch. Clip them close. There's your tiny, tiny little edge stitch. We'll do the second one. Oh, that kind of got off on the end and it buckled, so I'm just gonna try to pull that out, which it did, and all is good. So there's your two ends that are closed up. They won't be noticed in the end because they'll be moving around quite a bit. Got a thread in the wrist, get it all nice and clean. Now, to finish this strap, we are going to do a decorative stitch. You can see on my sample that I stitched with a decorative stitch, which was really pretty, and it was on a machine that has a lot of stitch options. A lot of machines don't have a lot of stitch options, and so because I want to use a stitch that I think everybody has. A zigzag looks really cute as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little scrap of fabric, and I'm going to do a few test samples. So a few test samples to see what kind of zigzag I would like going down the center of my bag. So I'm going to put it, let's see, I'm just going to kind of guess at my width and my length and just see if I like it. So right now I have it on the width of 2.5 and the length of 3. No, I don't want that. I want it, I don't mind the width, but I need my length to be shorter. So I'm going to go down to a 2 for the length and leave the width at 2.5. And let's see what that gives us. I think I want it wider. I don't mind the length, but I'm going to increase the width of it to, let's go to 3.5 and keep the stitch length the same. And let's see what that does. I kind of like that. One more sample of maybe 4.5 width and leaving the length at 2.5. I'm just gonna hold that. Oh, I like that better. So that is a width on this machine of 4.5 and a length of 2.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the very end, and I'm going to stitch on the right side of the fabric just because the wrong side usually it doesn't have quite as nice of a stitch, and I want that on my back. And so I'm going to put my material in, and I know the center should be 3/4 of an inch. So I should come over and have the edge on my 3/4 inch line, which is this line right here. So I'm going to put my needle in, and I'm going to double check this side. Need to make sure I line it up with the center of the presser foot, because we're on a zigzag. There we go. Move it over just a tiny bit more. Okay, now just see where your line is, because that's what you're going to follow all the way down the bag, or this strap. I'm going to give it a tiny little bit of a back there, just because we want to keep it straight. I'm going to do a little bit and look at it and make sure. There, I like that, it looks good. So we're going to do the whole piece the same way. Okay, we just finished stitching our zigzag on our strap. That any machine will have this zigzag, so you can do this decorative stitch no matter what machine you have. And we're getting ready to attach our strap and our to the front panel and the back panel together. So first what I want you to do is take one of your panels, it doesn't really matter which one. We're going to take our strap and we're going to find the halfway point, which is our seam that we originally had made when we seamed it together. We're going to take the right side of the handbag and the right side of the strap, so that your wrong side, you can see the seam line to the back, and we're going to line up that seam, and we always double check it, just kind of look, not quite on. This is where the details make all the difference. Be very careful, so that this is where it'll look either homemade or look really nice. We're going to pin down here, so we keep everything lined up. So we're going to stitch along this seam line, this edge, but the important part at this stage is to make sure that you're starting 1/4 of an inch in, because we're going to need our seam allowance to go up the bag. So I have this handy dandy little product. This is a Pilot Fry 100 ball, I don't know. Anyway, what it does is it disappears with heat. So I'm going to mark where I want to start and stop. So I'm going to come in my 1/4 of an inch, which is right here. Double check that. And then where I want to stop over here, which is my 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to stitch out of 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to bring it over to my machine. So we're going to start at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to put our needle down right on the orange line for 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And we're going to stitch that. I'm going to back stitch a couple stitches. Hold that and get to our end, and when we get to the orange mark, we're going to go backwards. And clip our stitches. When I back stitched, I went over slightly. This one stopped right on. And so what I'm going to do is pop that one stitch out. And since I back stitched 3 stitches, it's still going to stay in fine. There we go. Okay, so that's your first step. And just to show you, let's bring it over to the heat. I'll show you how it disappears. So if you can see the orange, I'm just gonna touch it with my heat and it's gone. So you don't have to worry about, I got an orange mark on my fabric. All right, the next side we're gonna do is, we're gonna go up the side, so we're gonna do a mitered corner. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn our fabric so it goes up the next direction. So by folding it to the back or to the side here, we are going to put a pin to hold it secure. Put another one up here just to hold it. And we're gonna look. So when you lift this up, it's gonna actually be like a little flag or a triangle. So what we're gonna do is take our orange marker and we're gonna get in here and we're going to mark our 1/4 inch in, which is about right here, and a 1/4 inch down, which is about right here, and that's our entry point. So by doing that, just check it. We're getting right to the edge there. So that makes a perfect little corner. So that is the right spot. Let's get him back pinned on there. We're gonna pin him all the way up. And when we get to the top, we're just gonna get to, go to the edge and backstitch to hold that secure. So we are going to do this 1/4 inch, but we're gonna put our needle in right in the corner where those two lines meet. Take out our pin. And just have to be careful. We are gonna backstitch. One more in. If I go over, then I can just trim it off again. We're just gonna do this whole side. All right, let's see how we did. Okay. Oh, what a nice little corner. Yay. So we're just gonna kind of leave him for a minute. We're gonna do this other side, which we're gonna actually have to stitch putting the bag on the inside of the machine, because you have to sew down this way as well. If you sew, I'll just give you a little direction there. If you sew this way, so let's say we get this pinned up here, and you sew this way, then it's gonna start slowly moving the fabric down a little bit to where it all gets off and you'll have a buckle. But if we sew up and out, then both sides will be balanced. That's anytime you sew anything down and up, you need to do the same direction. So here we're gonna get down in here again, if we can get it turned. A handy dandy little mannequin pin cushion with the top chewed off from my puppy that got a hold of it and got in trouble. And one more up here. All right, same thing. We're gonna mark our 1/4 inch in. A 1/4 inch down. Okay, there's our entry point at the little point. You can kind of check it. Yeah, that looks right. So now we'll stitch that down and we'll have this strap halfway sewn on. Okay, make sure it all lines up and looks good. few threads in my way. We'll clip them out when we get done. It's a little more difficult sewing this direction just because, number one, you're not used to it and your material's up under here. It's different to hold it. Everything's a little different. Now, it's holding. Let's clip that off there. Sometimes I just sew over my pins. You just have to be careful and slow down. So you don't have to take the time to go pull them out. Me kind of marking so I see where the end is. There you go. All right, let's see how we did. Remember, all this is on the inside. Okay. Yay. Now I take it over to the iron and we do a quick, just to kind of get it up off of the actual bag. Just kind of do a quick little piece there. This is where this little iron really is handy. It can get real close. It's not bulky. Get up in those corners. Okay, now for the other side. This is where it gets a little trickier, but I have total confidence that you guys can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. So we're gonna take our second side and we're gonna sew right side to right side. So we're gonna flip this over and we are going to do just like we did on the other one and line up our seam. Clear down to the edge, make sure it's all lined up because this is where it looks nice. Looks like good quality. And it's a little harder to do, but we're gonna go ahead and pin it down to make sure you got good control. I'm gonna come flip it over here a little bit, hold it. Same with this side. Pins are your friend at this point. And I'll be holding it when it gets to these points, and we're gonna mark it in 1/4 inch. So I know where to stop, and mark it in 1/4 inch to know where to start. Okay, so we're gonna sew just this edge. It's a little trickier, get it all flat. Make sure it's all flat. Maneuver it around a little bit, and 1/4 inch in, and starting at the line, or the position of the line. Just make sure you're not catching any extra fabric. Get up a minute, and then we're gonna stitch it. Okay. All right, so there's our first seam. Now we're gonna do a side. Like I said, it's always gets trickier. So we're gonna do the same mitered corner. I'm gonna flip it so that I can get my mitered corner up here. Got Got a lot more material you're working with, but just be patient. Life is about patience anyway, right? Okay, when you feel like you get it square, go ahead and pin it, and we're gonna do a couple checks on it. I'm just gonna kind of do a quick pin. So a few little tricks here. Okay, so one thing I wanna make sure is lined up is you can kind of feel the seam with the other seam. It's kind of hard to tell, but I wanna make sure that they are feeling like they're lined up. And they do. I'm gonna mark a 1/4 inch in and a 1/4 inch down and put our little, where our corner is gonna be. And I'm gonna double check it. I'm gonna put my pin through here. Comes out pretty darn good. And then I'm just gonna flatten this out. I'm gonna raise this, and our lines aren't quite lining up. So I'm gonna see the line, the stitch line from this side of the bag, and this is the other side of the bag. So I really would like for those to be lined up. So let's see. Put that pin there. I just need to adjust this slightly. And that changed my line just a little bit. Here's the line of the other bag, and here's our corner. So some of it's just kind of learning how to adjust and to feel and tell that. And I also want to make sure my top edge is lined up, and you can see that we're really, really close here. That's just what makes it look good quality instead of like it's homemade. Phew, all right, let's stitch it. Hold our breath and hope it works. So I'm going to put my needle down in that corner spot, make sure I'm at a 1/4 over, and sure edges all line up. Feel for my top edge. Almost there. Fingers crossed. Trim. Oh, good. It looks like it's lining up pretty close, and the top edge is pretty close. And do we have a corner? We have a corner. Yay! One more side. One more side. So we're gonna turn it over so we can get our mitered. This is probably the very hardest side because of all of the materials in the way. We're gonna do a quick pin down to check and see where we are. You guys ever poke yourself when you're pinning? I do all the time. Make sure you have Band-Aids around because you sure don't want any blood on your material. All right, so we're gonna look here. Not too shabby. Yay. Top edge is within about a 1/16. Keep him there. Try to keep moving this back. All right, so down here we're going to find our spot again, our marker. Quarter, looking good. That's our little spot. Pin him down so he doesn't move. And I'm gonna put one more pin so nothing shifts. This is the, everybody hold your breath. Fingers crossed. We're gonna have to stitch it on the other side, so we're gonna put all of our material in here. It's a little harder to stitch on this side, but this is our last seam. We're gonna put our needle down right in the corner again. And we should be right at a quarter, yes. And we are going to come forward a couple, back stitch a couple, and just slowly move on down. Take out as I go because it's just all bungled up here. Tight space. There we go. Are we ready to turn it? Okay, so that's all your seams. So what we're going to do is turn it and see how our corners are, see how everything is looking and lining up. Nice corners. See how it's lining up across pretty good, across pretty good, across, across. Corners look good. All right, we're gonna press that last side real quick. Just try to get up in there and give him a little press. You can do this before you turn it too, but I was a little too excited. That part went down there. There you go. I'll set him down. So he's finished. The inside is finished all clean. So there's no raw edges. Everything looks neat. It's called a clean finish. You were able to design, so using Design Aesthetic for how you want your squares put together, front and back, your lining, the little lip that shows, then your strap. These straps are made to where you can just tie a knot for however deep you want your strap. You can make it shorter or longer, crossover or whatever, bow, however you want to make it. We do have some trimming we need to do, but there's the bag. If you don't want a strap like a tie, you can always double the material over to whatever length that you want it. Make sure that it's not twisted, and you can double it like so and just stitch it down on the edges to make it whatever length that you want. So it's kind of universal. Other than that, we are done with our handbag, and so we could put it on our little model and see how it looks. I know the fabrics are a little different. There you go. So that's a project that is, like I said, about a level 2 because it does have some tight corners and stuff like that. But once you've made a blanket or some beginning projects, this is very straightforward, and it will refine and really help a lot of your sewing skills. So until the next tutorial, have a great day.